My best friend's hand was shaking when she handed me the envelope. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying for hours. "Maya, I need to tell you something," Jen whispered. "Before you hear it from someone else." We were sitting in her kitchen, the same place where we'd shared countless secrets over the past 12 years. The same table where we'd planned our futures, laughed until our stomachs hurt, and promised we'd always be honest with each other. I took the envelope, confused. Inside was a wedding invitation. Beautiful cream cardstock with gold lettering. Jennifer Dawson and Marcus Chen. My stomach dropped. Marcus was my boyfriend. Or at least I thought he was. "I'm so sorry," Jen said, her voice breaking. But she wasn't sorry enough to stop. The wedding was in 3 weeks. I met Marcus 2 years ago at a charity event Jen had invited me to. She worked in event planning and always brought me along as her plus one. That night, Marcus was there representing his family's company. He was charming, successful, and surprisingly down-to-earth for someone who grew up with money. When he asked for my number, I was thrilled. When I told Jen about it the next day, she seemed happy for me. She helped me pick outfits for our first dates. She gave me advice about what to say, how to act, what he might like. I thought she was being a good friend. Now I understood she was doing research, learning everything about our relationship so she could slide into it herself. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was how long it had been going on. According to the invitation, they'd been engaged for 4 months. 4 months of Jen listening to me talk about Marcus while planning her future with him. 4 months of her asking about our relationship problems and using that information to get closer to him. 4 months of her pretending to be my best friend while stealing my life. I sat in her kitchen, staring at the invitation, and something cold settled in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something sharper. Something patient. "How long?" I asked quietly. Jen looked down. 8 months. Months. Almost half of my relationship with Marcus had been a lie. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the invitation back in her face like she probably expected. Instead, I stood up calmly and said, "Congratulations." Jen's head snapped up, confused. "What?" I said, "Congratulations. I hope you're very happy together." She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. I think she wanted drama. She wanted me to fall apart so she could feel less guilty about what she'd done. But I had learned something important working as a financial analyst for the past 6 years. Emotional reactions cloud judgment. The best revenge is calculated, not explosive. I picked up my bag and walked to the door. "Maya, wait," Jen called. "We need to talk about this." I turned back and smiled. "There's nothing to talk about. You're getting married. I'll see you at the wedding." I drove home in silence, my mind already working through the details. Marcus and I had been together for 18 months. We talked about moving in together. He'd met my parents. I'd met his family, including his father, Richard Chen, who owned Chen Industries, a major real estate development company in the city. Marcus was being groomed to take over eventually. His family's approval meant everything to him. And his family loved me. Richard had told me more than once that I was good for Marcus, that I kept him grounded. His mother, Helen, had invited me to family dinners and asked my opinion on business matters. They respected that I had my own career, my own success. They didn't know that Marcus had been cheating on me with my best friend for 8 months. When I got home, I didn't call Marcus. I didn't confront him. Instead, I opened my laptop and started searching. Social media, public records, everything I could find about their relationship. I found photos Jen had posted months ago, carefully cropped so I wouldn't appear in the background. I found check-ins at restaurants Marcus had told me were business dinners. I found evidence of an entire secret relationship happening right under my nose. Then I found something else. Something interesting. A property listing for a penthouse apartment downtown. The same building where Marcus had told me he was investing in a unit as a business opportunity. Except the listing showed 2 names on the lease application. Marcus Chen and Jennifer Dawson. They'd been living together for 3 months. I called my brother that night. David was a lawyer specialized in contract law. He was also the only person I trusted completely. "I need your help," I said when he answered. "But you can't ask questions yet." "That bad?" he asked. "Worse." We met for breakfast the next morning at a diner far from my neighborhood. I showed him everything I'd found. The wedding invitation, the property listing, the social media evidence, the timeline of lies. David studied it all carefully, his expression darkening. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to go to the wedding," I said. "And I want to make sure they remember it forever." He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Tell me what you need." Marcus finally called 3 days after Jen gave me the invitation. "We need to talk," he said. His voice sounded tight, nervous. "Okay," I replied calmly. "Your place or mine? There's a coffee shop on 5th Street. Meet me there in an hour." He couldn't even be honest in his own apartment. We met at the coffee shop. Marcus looked terrible, like he hadn't slept. "I don't know how to say this," he started. I sipped my coffee and waited. "Jen and I. Something happened. It wasn't planned. It just. You fell in love," I finished for him. He looked relieved that I'd said it. "I never meant to hurt you." I nodded slowly. "When's the wedding?" 3 weeks. "Maya, I know this is hard, but—" "I'll come," I interrupted. Marcus froze. "What?" "To the wedding. Jen invited me. I'll be there." His face went pale. "You don't have to do that." "I want to," I said simply. "You were an important part of my life. I want to see you happy." I could see him trying to process this, trying to figure out if I was serious or setting a trap. But I kept my expression neutral, friendly even. "Are you sure?" he asked carefully. "Absolutely. Besides, your family will wonder where I am if I don't show up. Better to go and show everyone there's no hard feelings." That was the key. His family. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. He knew his parents wouldn't approve of how this had happened. "Maybe it's better if you don't." "I insist," I said firmly. "I'll be there." The next 2 weeks were busy. I had a lot to prepare. First, I reached out to Marcus's mother, Helen. We'd always gotten along well. "Helen, I heard about Marcus and Jen," I said when we met for lunch. "I wanted you to hear from me that I'm okay with it." She looked surprised. "You're being very gracious, Maya. Sometimes things don't work out. I just want Marcus to be happy." Then I mentioned casually that I'd been working on a major project at work. A financial analysis for a property development downtown. Helen's eyes lit up. "Which property?" I told her. It was the same building where Marcus and Jen had their secret apartment. "That's interesting," Helen said slowly. "Richard's been looking at that building too." I planted seeds carefully. With Helen, I mentioned the property. With Richard, I discussed Marcus's business judgment during a chance meeting at a restaurant. "He's always been so careful with investments," I said. "Very thoughtful about long-term value." Richard nodded. "He learned from the best." "I'm sure the wedding planning must be expensive," I continued. "But I suppose when you're truly in love, money doesn't matter." Richard frowned slightly. "They're keeping it simple, from what I understand." Simple. That was interesting because the invitation had listed a venue that cost at least $50,000 to book. Someone was lying about the wedding budget. And in the Chen family, financial dishonesty was the worst possible sin. Richard had built his empire on transparency and trust. While I worked on Marcus's parents, I made other preparations. Through my brother David, I hired a private investigator. Not to find more dirt on Marcus and Jen. I had enough of that. I needed something else. Something specific. The investigator came back with exactly what I needed 1 week before the wedding. "You were right," he said, handing me a folder. "The money trail is clear." Inside were bank statements, transfer records, and receipts. For 8 months, Marcus had been paying for 2 households. His shared apartment with Jen, and the relationship expenses he'd been hiding from me. Expensive jewelry for Jen that he'd claimed were business gifts. Weekend trips he'd said were work conferences. The total was staggering. Over $80,000 in 8 months. Money that Marcus didn't actually have. Marcus's trust fund was structured carefully. He had access to investment income, but the principal was controlled by his father until Marcus turned 35 or proved himself responsible enough to manage the family business. According to the bank statements, Marcus had been borrowing against his future inheritance to fund his double life. He'd taken loans from 3 different banks, using his expected trust fund as collateral. Richard would be furious when he found out. But I wasn't going to tell Richard. Not directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, I did something more subtle. I sent an anonymous email to the Chen Industries financial controller, with copies of some of Marcus's personal bank statements. Just enough to raise questions. Just enough to trigger an internal review. The wedding day arrived. I wore a simple navy dress. Elegant but not attention-grabbing. I arrived exactly on time, not early, not late. The venue was beautiful, exactly as expensive as I'd suspected. Jen looked stunning in her white dress. Marcus looked nervous in his tuxedo. And Marcus's parents looked confused when they saw me. "Maya," Helen said, coming over immediately. "I didn't expect you to actually come." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied warmly. "Where are you sitting?" "Oh, I'm not sure. I'll find a spot." Helen frowned. "There should be a seating chart." We walked to the entrance together. The seating chart was displayed on an elegant board. I scanned the names looking for mine. It wasn't there. "That's strange," Helen said. Jen appeared, her face flushed. "Maya, I didn't think you'd actually show up." "You invited me," I said calmly. "The invitation you personally delivered. Remember?" Helen's expression changed. "Jennifer, you invited Maya personally?" Jen stammered. I wanted to be mature about it." "How thoughtful," I said. "Though it seems my name isn't on the seating chart. We had to finalize numbers and—" "It's fine," I interrupted. "I'll stand in the back. I just wanted to see Marcus get married." The way I said it, with complete sincerity, made Jen's face go pale. Because she suddenly realized I wasn't here to cause a scene. I was here for something else. Something she couldn't predict or control. Helen was still frowning. "Richard needs to hear about this." The ceremony began. I stood at the back of the venue watching. Marcus kept glancing toward me, distracted. The officiant had to repeat questions twice. When it was time for vows, Marcus stumbled over his words. He looked terrified, though I hadn't done anything except exist in the room. Guilt has a way of eating people from the inside out. Jen's voice was steady though. She'd wanted this. She'd planned for it. She'd stolen my relationship and turned it into her perfect day. When the officiant said, "If anyone has any reason these two should not be married," the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone looked at me. I smiled and stayed silent. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant finally said. And just like that they were married. Applause filled the room. The reception was held in the same venue, a large ballroom with crystal chandeliers. I found my way to the bar and ordered water. Helen appeared beside me. "You're handling this with remarkable grace," she said. "Thank you," I replied. "Though I am confused about something." "What's that?" "The venue. It's beautiful. Must have cost a fortune." Helen's expression tightened. "Yes, more than Richard wanted to spend, actually. But Marcus insisted, said he'd handle part of the cost himself." "That's generous of him," I said carefully. "I hope he didn't overextend himself financially." "What do you mean?" I hesitated like I was uncomfortable. "Nothing. I'm sure he knows what he's doing." But the seed was planted. Helen was already suspicious. Now she was worried. Richard found me an hour into the reception. "Maya, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For being professional about this situation. I know it can't be easy." "Life goes on," I said. Though I do hope Marcus is being responsible. I'd hate to see him make poor decisions. Richard studied me carefully. What kind of decisions? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Just one. A receipt I'd found during my investigation. For a diamond necklace worth $25,000, purchased 3 months ago. He gave this to someone, I said. I assumed it was a business gift. But now I'm not sure. Richard's face went hard. Where did you get this? It was in some documents Marcus left at my apartment, I lied smoothly. I found it when I was packing up his things. Richard's investigation was swift and thorough. By the time they cut the wedding cake, he'd made several phone calls. By the time the first dance ended, he'd accessed Marcus's bank records through the family's financial controller. By the time dinner was served, he knew everything. I watched from my table as Richard pulled Marcus aside. Their conversation was quiet but intense. Marcus's face went from confused to defensive to panicked in the span of 3 minutes. Jen noticed and hurried over. Richard included her in the conversation. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the moment everything fell apart. Marcus trying to explain. Richard's expression growing colder. Jen's desperation as she realized the perfect life she'd stolen was crumbling. Helen joined them, her face shocked. The music stopped. Guests were staring. Richard's voice finally rose loud enough for everyone to hear. $80,000, Marcus. Borrowed against your trust fund without authorization. Do you understand what you've done? Marcus looked around desperately and found me watching. Our eyes met across the ballroom. He knew. Somehow he knew I'd done this. It was for the wedding, Marcus said weakly. For our future. You lied to me about the costs, Richard replied. You told me you were being responsible. You told me Jennifer was a good influence. He turned to Jen. Did you know about the loans? Jen's silence was answer enough. Richard shook his head. This reception is over. Everyone out. Now. Guests began gathering their things, whispering, shocked. The perfect wedding was ending in disaster. As people filed out, Jen found me near the exit. You did this, she hissed. You ruined everything. I didn't ruin anything, I said calmly. I just showed up. Like you invited me to. You told his father about the money. I showed him a receipt I found. What he chose to do with that information was his decision. Jen's hands were shaking. We lost everything. Richard's cutting Marcus off. The trust fund, the job, everything. That's unfortunate, I replied. But maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to build your happiness on lies. Marcus appeared behind her. Maya, please. You have to tell them this is a misunderstanding. I looked at him, really looked at him. What misunderstanding? You did borrow that money. You did lie to your father. You did cheat on me. I'm sorry, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I know I hurt you. But destroying my life won't change what happened. I didn't destroy your life, I said. You did that yourself. I just made sure the truth came out. At my wedding, Jen said bitterly. You couldn't even let me have one perfect day. Smiled. You wanted me here, remember? You personally delivered that invitation. You wanted to show me that you'd won, that you'd taken everything I had. I stepped closer. But you didn't take anything. You stole a cheater and a liar. And now you get to keep him with no money, no family support, and everyone knowing exactly how your marriage started. Jen's face crumbled. Behind us, Helen was watching. Maya, she called softly. I excused myself and walked over. I'm sorry you had to see this. Don't be, Helen said. You saved us from a much bigger problem. If Marcus had continued this pattern, hidden more debts, made worse decisions. She trailed off. I thought Jennifer was good for him. Thought she was like you. But she's not, is she? No, I agreed. She's not. Richard joined us. I owe you an apology, Maya. We should have seen what kind of person my son was becoming. He's your son, I said gently. You love him. That makes it hard to see clearly. What will you do now? Helen asked. I looked back at Marcus and Jen, standing alone in the empty ballroom, their perfect day destroyed. I'm going to go home, I said, and move on with my life. I had already started, actually. The job offer I'd received 2 weeks ago from a competing firm, with a significant raise. The story spread quickly. In our social circle, everyone heard about the wedding disaster. About Marcus's financial lies, about Jen's betrayal, about how Richard had cut his son off completely. Some people called me for details. I gave them nothing. Some people said I was cruel for ruining the wedding. I didn't respond. Others said I was brilliant. I didn't confirm or deny. The truth was simpler than revenge. I had just exposed what was already there. The lies, the debts, the betrayal. None of that was my fault. I had simply stopped protecting people who had hurt me. 3 months later, I heard that Marcus and Jen had separated. Turns out their relationship couldn't survive without his family's money funding their lifestyle. Another month after that, Jen tried to reach out. I blocked her number. Some doors once closed stay closed. A year has passed since that wedding. I'm in a new job that I love, making more money than ever before. I'm dating someone new, someone honest and kind. Someone who doesn't need me to be less so he can feel like more. Sometimes I think about that day in Jen's kitchen when she handed me the invitation. How my heart broke. How I wanted to scream and cry and fall apart. But instead I stayed calm. I stayed strategic. I stayed patient. My brother David says I handled it perfectly. My therapist says I should probably work through some trust issues. They're both right. The truth is patient. It can wait longer than any lie. My grandfather used to say that, and I never understood it until that year. Jen and Marcus built their relationship on lies. And eventually the truth caught up. I didn't have to force it. I just had to make sure the right people saw what was already there. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to people. It's letting them face the natural consequences of their own choices. And showing up to watch.